Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the Music Masterclass. So this is my weekly series I'm doing on Thursdays where we talk about making music. We talk about in theory, ear training, everything having to do with the process of becoming a better musician. So I see people are starting to show up here and introduce themselves, which is great. So hopefully we have just a problem-free session today, and I'm looking forward to sharing with y'all. So what I want to do first is, seeing as I already see my chat is not keeping up, I'm just going to close that version of my chat window and pop it back open over here. It's not showing up over here either for some reason. Not sure why. Not going to sweat it. It's just a thing. So I can see the chat on my other system here. So even if it's not showing up on this system for some reason, things are okay. But hopefully it'll show up here sooner or later. There we go. There's some Steiner coming in from Oslo. But Dean's is not showing up on the screen. Don't know why. Don't worry about it. Just the way it is. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about music today. And I kind of have... It's kind of open here, so if people have particular topics that they're wanting to cover, kind of other than what we might normally talk about or what I might have planned, feel free to be asking some musical questions for me to try to answer. But the one thing I want to do for sure is get to Jim Ivy's piece that we didn't get to last week because I spent so long trying to figure out why I couldn't get sound. And, I think I figured out why I wasn't getting sound last week. I think I eventually figured it out, of course, as soon as the thing was over and I tried to test again. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Jim's piece here. So Jim Ivy is let's first see, Jim, you are here, yes, and you're in Colorado. Wow, cool. So from what I understand, that was, maybe like a half hour south of where I'm at or something. But so cool. Jim, I'm going to invite you to the stage here so that if you want to come on and chat about your piece here, you are now welcome to do so. By the way, you can see there is a TA here. That's my test account. That's my other system here where I'm, making sure that everything is hunky-dory. So yeah, Jim's piece was really interesting and nice little song. And, we've been talking about Beatles songs and, the idea of pop songs in general, and this kind of has its own vibe going on, and I'd love to get deeper inside it. So, Jim, how you doing? I think I can hear you.
I'm here. I can hear you.
Yeah, I hear you too. Beautiful. So, you're in Colorado?
I'm at Chatfield State Park.
Welcome. Beautiful place. I love it.
It's like being in New York City, camping out. Haven't seen as many people in over a month.
Ah, okay. Wow. In the park?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah. Let's talk about your piece. Your road leads ever yonder, and it has to do with taking a road trip, which is what you're doing. And so I don't know if it specifically was written about what you're doing right now, but tell me about your piece here before we take a listen to it.
Well, to start with, it's I'm hearing an echo. Can you?
You are hearing an echo?
Yes, I was. I still am.
So
I still am.
All right, hold on. That normally happens if this setting is not being honored properly. How about now?
Well, no, I don't hear the echo now.
Okay, so this seems to be the problem I had last week, so people can remind me if I'm having problems. Sometimes it'll say something in this dialogue here, but then it doesn't actually work until I change it back and change it and then change it back. So that's my little point of learning here. Anyhow,
about this piece, actually, it's kind of an inside joke. I have a friend who is a songwriter, and she is she's written several songs, and she's paying $1,500 a month to some guy in Nashville to promote her songs, which to me seems kind of insane. But I wrote this just as a kind of inside joke, and you'd have to know a little bit about her to catch all the joke. But the I did not intend for the instrumental parts. This is not the way I've done it. If I was handing this out to musicians as print form, the parts would look completely different.
Sure.
I made this
playback score
as a playback to create a SoundCloud recording that then I shared with her. And I think I added the SoundCloud link down below in the post.
You did, and actually, I want to kind of pause on that point for a second to share something with you that some people who may have seen this already, and I have to say this came as a complete surprise to me. Muse Group, the kind of parent company of MuseScore, they also own Audacity at this point, and a few other things. Ultimate Guitar, they just today announced what looks like a SoundCloud competitor called audio.com, and I don't know how the heck they pulled off getting audio.com. They must have had to pay someone a lot of money to get that URL, but audio.com is now in beta, and it's like a SoundCloud sort of thing. I still don't know what the terms will be, what the storage will be, what kind of prices will be for different kinds of accounts, but right now you can just create an account there and upload some songs. Anyhow, go on.
I think that's great. Mainly, I've maxed out my account on SoundCloud, so it's nice to have another option. But the electronic piano part, what I really wanted was a steel guitar, but I couldn't find a good sound for steel guitar, so I just did the best I could with the piano part there. And then if you look through, like in the third measure there, you can see where the guitar, normally you just write that as, normally you just put slashes in and tell the guitar player what you wanted.
Sure. Yeah, give them chord symbols
so
and
would
some
know
slashes.
what to do without having to talk about it even. But it's just a really simple little piece. I mean, there's only 2 chords in the whole thing. You got tonic and dominant, C and G7, and of course it goes up the Great American Modulation at the very last chorus, but just to get some lift to it. But really, it was just fun. And the way I wrote it, actually, I was in the car and used my cell phone, and I just kind of hummed the melody in the recorder on my cell phone. And then after I had the basic ideas of the melody, I wrote the lyrics. Spent more time on the lyrics than anything else. And then I just had to go back and reconstruct from that on how to do it. But I didn't do it like I would normally do a piece in MuseScore. MuseScore came in as almost a second afterthought to actually writing the melody. And probably the hardest thing was for me to figure out what the melody was. I sang it, but when you're riding in the car and you're recording on your cell phone, you don't necessarily sing the correct pitches. I mean, relatively they're correct, but you may have C at some weird instead of A440, you may have a 500. You don't know to get to something to check it out. But anyway, I transcribed the melody from that I'd sung slowly into this, and then I just the chords are, like I say, it's just simple. And that's typical for this sort of music. They don't use a lot of they don't use any extensions pretty much.
Sure.
If they do, it's the
7th
guitar
on the 5 chords about it.
Yeah, and so the bass line is just the heart of it. Just 1 and 5 primarily. The drums is boom chick, boom chick, boom chick. Now, when I put that into MuseScore, it sounds very mechanical. So I exported it, all the rhythm parts, to MIDI, and I opened it up in a I can't even say the name of the DAW I used, but in there I just did some humanization, they call it.
Okay.
Basically, it lets you tell it that you want a certain percentage of the notes before the beat or after the beat, and you can actually listen to it and use little sliders as you go along.
Nice.
Until you get it a little bit less mechanical sounding. And so then I re-imported that into MuseScore, and that's why the drum parts, as you get further on down into here, the drum parts, you would never give a drummer a 6/4 rest.
Sure.
I mean,
but that was just its way of notating, hey, that note's a little late, so I'm going to notate it a little late, because that's how it was in the MIDI. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can't look at this and expect anybody to actually read those parts. So that's basically, what I think of when I think about the song. I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, let's take a listen. So if I press play, I haven't pressed play on this today. Is it hooked up to like a separate audio now, or is it going to just?
No, you're going to hear what's on the score.
All right. Should I play the SoundCloud version instead? Because one way we're going to see, well, like you said, it's not really what you would notate. But here, I'm just going to press play on your SoundCloud thing, maybe. And does that make sense?
That'll make sense. I'm actually singing it.
Because then we can hear the lyrics of that,
and then
I'll try my best to follow along with the score.
Okay.
So, the only, so far from my perspective, other than the echo that people were hearing on you, and I'm hoping that when I fixed it for you, it fixed for everyone else. I'm still waiting to see some confirmation in the chat about that. But, so I had mentioned to some people earlier, I think during the cafe, that, or maybe during office hours, that my, the building I'm in, they're changing internet providers this week. And so there's always the chance that weird things happen with my internet, and right now it seems slow. And I don't know why, but whatever. Here we go. I'm going to hit play, and then we'll listen to the song and talk a little more, okay?
Okay.
Here we go. Take a minute to get started. Oh, really? Does it not let me change tabs?
Well, the road leads over yonder, though I cannot see its end. There is a place that's calling, a place I've never been. Well, a place I've never been.
I'm just going to not even try to follow on the score. I'm just going to keep hiccuping.
Yet the road leads over yonder, and I will follow. Don't ask me where I'm going, well, I'll be back again. Some are born to travel, some roads have no end. Over mountain and meadow, cross river and stream, through canyons of wonder, looking for a dream. Well, I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been. It's too hot down in Texas, too cold in Michigan. Some say California would be a pretty spot. So maybe San Diego, then maybe not. Well, the road leads over yonder, though I cannot see its end. There is a place that's calling, a place I've never been, a place I've never been, not even in a dream. Yet the road leads over yonder, and I will follow. Yet the road leads over yonder, and I will follow.
Nice. Love the song. Very cool. Whoa, stop.
Stop. Down the bottom of the page.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's more what I'm used to hearing from you. All right. Cool.
Well, that's, that's my preferred music. If I'm just playing music, I'd rather play Dixieland than anything else. But, I really feel like being a musician means you have to be a little bit versatile. And so, as a horn player...
I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday that, this idea of a breadth of experience is hugely important, and I think not given enough attention.
It really is. I mean, I've played with symphony orchestras, professionally, and I've played with country bands. I've even played with bands that nobody spoke English but me. They'd call out the key, and off we'd go. So, but I think that understanding different styles of music is important if you're going to call yourself a musician. I don't think you can. I mean, I prefer Dixieland jazz. That's what I like to do. But if I'm going to call myself a musician, if somebody calls me and wants me to play the country band, I should be able to do it. If they call me and want to play in a woodwind quintet, I should be able to do it. And you have
that
to
would be
know
nice,
those
huh?
different styles.
Yeah. And, and not just from that practical perspective of, being able to take the gig, which is, important in itself, but also, what you learn about music by doing styles other than the one that is your main focus. Because often that style of music is informed by other styles, and the thing, so if Dixieland jazz is informed in part by blues, but also by perhaps marching band music, but then marching band music also influences some other style, maybe there's something in that other style that can be brought back into your experience with Dixieland jazz and say, wow, I didn't know that was a thing, right? So there's so much to learn about music by that kind of cross-pollination.
Yeah, and jazz itself, which early jazz, was a combination. It came from different places. It started off mainly in New Orleans. In New Orleans, you had Creole musicians that were highly educated in the European style of music. They weren't just off the street.
Right.
But you did have guys that were just off the street. And quite frankly, the war between the states made it possible, because after the war, New Orleans was a depot for war surplus instruments. And these guys that had no money could go down and buy an instrument for next to nothing. And so all of that fed in together, and the red line, it's amazing. The history of it is very fascinating. And I love it. And it does. It ties back into Bach. The chord progressions are simple, but you can find them throughout the Western tradition of music. And they came into jazz that way.
Right. And, now, did you need to take that call?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. It's probably somebody trying to sell me something.
Yeah, that's very, very possibly true. So when I go through this song here and think about, so you probably saw me counting on my fingers at one point. Did you instantly know what that was about and have any comments about that, or do I need to ask you some questions about why I was counting on my fingers?
I'll ask you the question. I didn't notice you were counting.
Okay. So what happens is there's that spot where there's like a long held chord on the 5 towards the end of the verse. And it's a little hard for me to find in here. Right here. So dream, yet the road leads ever yonder. And I will, however it goes, and I will follow. So that extended G chord kept catching me by surprise. And so I was wondering, in doing that, now, did that make it not be a 4-bar phrase? But no, you actually added enough measures there and to the next thing that everything still was 4-bar phrases. Were you consciously rounding up to 4-bar phrases, or did you just hear that when you extended that? Because you could have easily ended up with a 6-bar phrase or a 5 or a 7-bar phrase out of that.
Well, this is basically dance music.
Mm-hmm.
And dancers 2 feet each,
Yeah.
And so they tend to do things in multiples of 2, but 6 would tend to throw them off, because what they're used to is the 8-bar phrase.
Sure.
99% of music uses 8-bar phrases in this style.
Right.
And so, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I would have, as I was listening to just now to it when you played it back, the drum part needs to have a little bit of a bump, a little bit of a dynamic change. I just left it all flat.
Sure.
But the shot on the first bar here of the G7, the drums come in just a little bit late, but this should be this. I need to accent that note.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a playback, fine-tuning-y sort of thing. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because it totally could have, if you hadn't wanted to extend that, it could have just been, yet the road leads ever yonder, and I will follow, and that would have been the end of the 4-bar phrase. So you
Mhm.
by extending that chord even one, you had to then extend it 2 and then 3 and then 4, and that's a thing, right? Because like you said, dance music, you're going to want to have those multiples, especially multiples of 8 beats, because so much dance is based on 8-beat patterns, but which is 2 measures. But even so, 4 measures is that much more powerful. Um, if you can make your phrases be 4 bars, which often they naturally are, but sometimes you do something that makes it a little off, and then you have to decide how to deal with it. And sounds like you dealt with it.
And but, by changing that up and having that, it adds just a little bit of, it makes it a little bit less common. I say this is
Yeah.
very
Oh
common
yeah.
throughout, but it gives a little bit of suspense and then resolution to it.
I
Which is,
absolutely agree. And that idea that, there's this balance to be had in music between the expected and the unexpected. I mean, if your song is going to be in the key of C major, totally diatonic melody, and have nothing but the 1 chord and the 5 chord, it's hard to imagine, if I just describe that there's going to be anything unique at all about the song. And yet, it's things like that, these little touches like that add that touch of uniqueness, that touch of interest, that hook, as it were, that makes
yeah,
it
and in
interesting.
his style, the words are more important than there are in a lot of music. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
because
Story
that's
songs.
that's what 90% of the people that are listening to this style of music listen to the words.
Hmm.
You know, because that's more immediate. It's easier to grasp than melody. Talking about extensions like that, I was looking at Humble wrote a piece, posted a piece. It's been a month ago because I've been on the road for a month, but I can't remember what he titled it. But it has. When I was listening to it, I really liked the melody, and I've been doing what I could to figure out why. And there's one place in there, he wrote an 8 measure phrase, but the last 2 bars are exactly like the 2 bars before. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And yesterday I was camped down in New Mexico, down a little hidden valley,
Hmm.
and I got up this morning and went for a walk. And I'd go 10 steps, and I'd stop because it was so friggin' beautiful that I had to stop and look at it. And then I said, that's what Humble did. He wrote a really nice measure, and then he wrote a really nice little 2 measure phrase, and then he repeated it because it was so beautiful it needed to be repeated.
Yeah.
And there's so many. That's one of the things that makes music so much fun.
Yeah, and that idea, sometimes we call it a tag. If you repeat something, I mean, the word tag gets used for a number of different things, but that idea of taking a particular phrase, especially at the end of a piece, and then, or the end of a phrase, and repeating those last 2 measures, that's a common thing also in poetry.
Mm-hmm.
You tell a story, and it leads to a place, and then you emphasize your conclusion. You emphasize your conclusion, right?
Yeah.
You
The
say that last
emphasize
phrase
is,
again.
that's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
just it's a basic human perception thing. It's hard to talk about.
Yeah. So there's one other thing that I wanted to see. It's a little hard for me because with only the 1 measure per system, and then having to scroll to see this, it's a little hard for me to do this. But I'm gonna go and play the song again, and I just want to check one thing and ask you about this because yeah, you have only 2 chords, but to me, there was an obvious place if you had wanted to use a 4 chord where that would have happened, and it's right before that extended G. So I'm just going to play that so people can hear this and then get your opinion on it.
Well, the road leads over yonder, though I cannot see its end. There is a place that's calling, a place I've never been. Well, a place I've never been, not even in a dream.
Right there. Not
Yeah.
even in a dream. And then
Yet the road leads over
then go right back to the
yonder.
1 chord and then the 5 chord. So that would have been possible. And I have a sense that if I were writing this, it would have been really hard to resist the urge for that 4 chord. Did you like say, nope, this is only going to have 2 chords and not go there? Or, what was...
That, like I said, it's kind of an inside joke
Okay.
from a friend. And so I wanted to make it as simple as possible. I say, what could be simpler than I could try to do it in 1 chord.
Yeah, you could.
But that's really, really hard to write something that's interesting. You only use 1 chords. So yeah, it was a conscious decision to only use 2 chords throughout the entire piece.
Yeah,
kind of an exercise. I found that I learn a lot when I limit my resources.
Yes, and that is a definite truth. I mean, that's to some extent what it means to work within a style, is to like say, okay, I'm not going to do these other things that are not within the style. So when it comes to the cliches of the style, as you say, the big key change, the big go up a half step at the end, you're in C, and then now you're in D flat and up a half step.
Yeah, we call it. My theory teacher, when I was in undergrad school many, many years ago, called that the Great American Modulation.
Okay, so I'm really curious now, and I hate to put you on the spot about this, but when are we talking about here? Because I don't think that I hear this so much before the 70s.
Well,
it was already a big enough thing pre-70s.
It was big enough because I was in school, and I started school in '61.
Gotcha.
Undergraduate school, '61. So probably studied arranging in probably junior year, I guess, when I took that course.
Gotcha.
Yeah, his name was Steve Samples. If you may have heard of it. He was the arranger for the University of Alabama band, and taught theory, taught arranging, football band arranging specifically.
Okay.
And just he's one of those guys, kind of like you, man. He did hear it. He could be on the bus, going to a game and write a score, with pencil,
Yeah. I've been known to do that, but yeah, it's not something I've needed to explore that much in a while, because I'm always around something that can make music with me. But yeah, so I was curious about that, because that whole up a half step modulation, and I want to explain some things for the sake of other people thinking about this who maybe aren't as familiar. I mean, we're all familiar with pop music because it's so pervasive in the culture, but maybe we've never thought about these things. When you learn about modulation in a theory class, usually it's a different thing than what exists in pop music. In other words, if you study modulation as it applies to Mozart, or as it applies to Beethoven or Schumann or Stravinsky, it almost never means the thing it means in pop music. The thing it means in pop music is, I'm going to take that same thing I already sang and now do that same thing in another key. Modulation was not that in classical music. Classical music modulation is, I want to do this different thing, and to make sure it sounds sufficiently different, I'm going to do it in a different key. So that's sort of a different way of thinking about what the purpose of the modulation. This Great American Modulation, this pop song modulation, is very much about taking the chorus you just sang and saying, hey, I want to make this chorus that much more exciting. How can I make it more exciting? I'm going to move it up a step, because now I'm a little bit higher in my voice. And not only am I a little higher in my voice, but if we think about the actual notes here, the notes in the key of C, it's all the white notes. As soon as we go to D flat, we've got 5 black notes. It's 5 different pitches. So even though it's only a half step different, it sounds very different. Mozart never in his entire life wrote a half step up modulation that I know of, because it would have been too drastic. His modulations would go from C to F, which is further on the piano, but it's only one note different. It's a B natural changing to a B flat. So modulation in classical music really has a different function, a different way of going about things, but this thing of going up the half step, yeah, you don't get more American pop song cliche than that. So that was that also a KM tribute thing there?
Yeah, that's I mean, like I say, it's a cliche, but you hear it a lot. And I think one of the reasons for that is because usually this is a vocal sort of thing, and vocalists have short range. If you go from C to F, the vocalist may not be able to stretch.
Sure, yeah.
Go up a half step, well, they're almost certain to be able to hit it. I think probably when I think of this modulation, the half step, I think of Mac the Knife, the Kurt Long.
Oh yeah, and that is the one song that I know that goes back older that really exploits that, and every chorus going up another step.
Yeah, we used to do that. We'd play it in all 12 keys because it's one of those songs people request all the time, and for a musician it's like when the Saints go marching in, it gets really old. And so just to make it more fun, we'd play it in the weird keys, just
yeah.
It's one of those things.
Yeah, but, and it's expected to modulate, but maybe not all 12 keys. But yeah, if you're going to try to please yourselves in the playing, why not throw in that little challenge for yourself? Sure.
Yeah. Audience dancers generally don't know what you're doing anyway. They're just listening to get their feet moving the right way.
So yeah, is there any other things that you would want to say or ask or anything about this piece here?
Not really. It's just I do these things because they're fun for me to do, and I learn because I'm working with limited resources. I don't have the whole world. I mean, I specifically decide that I'm not going to use something. It's like Dean did that. That wonderful piece where you use 4 notes.
Oh, yeah.
But he took those 4 notes and he made them, the whole piece hangs together logically and is exciting, even though he's purposely limited the range of his pitches. And I think that's a fun thing to do. When we did the challenge, I did that.
Right.
The chords were, that we were given. I decided I was going to only use the bottom tetrachord of each of those. So if it was a C chord, I would only use C, D, E, F.
I don't
if
think
it
I
were a
realized
G chord,
you
I
did
only use G, A, B, C, et cetera, et cetera. And so
you
I
might have mentioned that, but hadn't remembered that you did that.
I don't know that I mentioned it, but it's just that was. I generally do that a lot when I'm writing something. I'll try to if it's a particular problem that I'm interested in solving for myself, I will set it up so that I have to solve that problem multiple times in a song.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a learning device as well as anything else, and sometimes it comes out musical also. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of great music to be had by cutting some stuff out to say, I'm not going to focus on these, I'm just going to focus on this thing, and then you do a really good job of that thing as a result because you don't have anything else to distract you. So yeah,
it's like you're an archer and you've got all these different arrows in your quiver, and so you see you have a purpose for every different arrow, and the more arrows you can create in your quiver, the more flexible you're going to be as a musician. And it's that way. It's that way with teaching too. Different kids need different modes of communication. So a good teacher has lots of arrows in their teaching quiver, and a good musician has lots of arrows in their musical quiver. And I guess it's that way with just about everything. But that's my thinking when I get to it.
Great. All right, well, I want to thank you so much for the music and for the conversation here, and glad this worked out here. And again, welcome to Colorado. How long are you going to be around?
I'll probably leave Friday morning.
Gotcha.
My son and 3 grandkids live in Littleton, and so I'll see them today, and then I'll head back. I don't know where I'm going. I may go home. I may go to Wyoming. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Well. Welcome and enjoy your time here. Picked a good week for it, weather-wise. So
sure,
it's often good weeks here, though. All right. Thanks again, Jim, and I'll be talking later. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. So I wanted to just get inside that piece because sometimes there's so much to be. So much to be learned, so much to understand looking at simple things that are deliberately simple, often lead to important realizations about music, because now you're not focusing on all these other details that may or may not be, relevant or important to whatever. I mean, yes, it's great to know about all the complicated harmonic things and counterpoint things that I might otherwise be talking about, but sometimes just knowing, well, what does it really mean to create a song based on two chords, and what are the parameters, what are the things you're going to be playing around with there? We could also be looking at, how that melody fit the chords and so forth. There's all sorts of things you can talk about and really get a good understanding of it within the realm of just dealing with something simple. In a jazz setting, one of the things we do, and I'm gonna put this out here right now for people, I'm gonna actually recommend that we don't use C major for this, but we are going to use just the white notes. And this is a big thing in the jazz world, and it is the idea of improvising over a single scale, improvising with a single scale, that basically stretching it over a single chord. We refer to it in jazz as modal improvisation. And it's a bit of a misnomer in that it really, I can talk about the Dorian mode and say, yes, I'm going to use the white notes starting on D, and that's going to be my set of pitches. And if I do that, then you can relate it. Oh, yeah, the Renaissance had something called the Dorian mode, and it was also all the white notes starting on D. So if I do this thing in jazz, it must be similar to what was happening in the Renaissance. And the answer is, well, no, it's not really all that similar. What we're doing, we're all using the same alphabet if I speak English or I speak I think about it. If I speak Spanish, I need the little ñ, right? But whatever. You can speak a lot of different languages and write a lot of different languages using essentially the same alphabet, but it's different stuff that you're going to write, very different, and it's not necessarily understandable to write in one language and then, expect someone who speaks a different language to understand it. Similarly, the things that I'm going to do with Dorian here are not at all what Renaissance musicians would do with Dorian. That said, here's the deal. I, in my left hand on the keyboard, am going to play D. And I'm going to play two Ds because I got a hand, not just one finger, so why not play the whole octave? And then, since I got an index finger right here sitting on A, and it's a fifth between them, I'm going to hit that. And that's going to be my left hand. In my right hand, I just want to improvise with the white notes. And I'm just going to do this for a second, and then I'm going to talk about it. I'm starting to have too much fun, so I need to stop and talk about what I'm doing. So I'm just making up melodies, and I'm just making them over this D pedal, right? So this is pedal point, right? If this was an organ, it would literally be on the pedal. And I'm just improvising melodies over that pedal. So if you don't have to have any great piano skills to do this. You just stick your hand on this and then improvise here. Now, if piano is not something you have any experience with or access to, but you want to practice doing this, okay, fine. Take whatever instrument that you are comfortable with and let MuseScore drone that D for you. Or, find some other, something that can drone that D for you. I was doing like little rhythmic things, right? I was doing little rhythmic answers to this because that's what happens in jazz. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the melodies. And this idea that I'm just using the notes of the Dorian scale, which is just these notes, these same 7 pitches, they're the same 7 pitches that Jim was using on the road yonder, whatever, road leads ever yonder, right? But the road leads ever yonder was trying to emphasize a C major chord, and I'm trying to emphasize a D minor chord, right? So his, right, that's the 3 5 5 5. I'm talking scaled. I'm also talking chord tones, right? That's the 3rd of the chord, the 5th of the chord, and then we go up to the 6th, and we come right back down to the 5th. Right? And then again, chord tone, there's the third, and then we have a non-chord tone just for a second, and then we're back to a chord tone, right? And then chord tone, non-chord tone for a moment, and then come back and land on that chord tone. This piece is emphasizing the chord tones. It's using the rest of the scale, but it's emphasizing the chord tones. Now, I'm going to do the same thing with Dorian here. Now that was emphasizing these three notes, the notes of D minor. And that thing that I'm doing, emphasizing the notes of D minor, you might think, oh, that's what you're supposed to do because we're doing Dorian. And, well, supposed to is a strong word, but no, I would say exactly the opposite. It's going to get boring really fast in a jazz context if we're trying to only use one scale and then we keep hammering the 1, 3, and the 5 there. It's going to be too much of that chord. Like, you know, Jim's piece was simple, but it had 2 chords, right? It didn't stay on that C chord for more than like 6 measures at a time. That might have been as long as it did. I don't know. Maybe even only 4 measures at a time. But this idea that you need something to give you this contrast. And so in Jim's case, it was a 1 chord and a 5 chord, and the 5 chord gave the contrast, right? Well, a lot of jazz and a lot of rock for that matter is 1 chord. It really is 1 chord. But then the way to make that interesting is to not keep focusing on just those 3 pitches. Because if you just keep focusing on those 3 pitches, it is going to get boring after 4. By the time we're done with 4 measures, we're ready to hear something else. So that's why in my improvisation, I was focusing on the notes not in that D minor chord. I was focusing on the E, the G, and the B. And I had that C in there also, right? So I'm still getting these chord tones in there. But I'm allowing myself to enjoy the sounds of these other notes. This is a very jazz thing. It's not something, it's not like Bach didn't use notes outside the chord. Sure he did, but he used them the way Jim was, as passing tones, as ways of getting to the chord tones. In a jazz setting, when we're doing this particular thing, actually all the time in jazz, but this modal improvisation lets you really see it very easily and practice it yourself, even if you don't have mad jazz improv skills. All you need is white notes on a piano, or notes, just wiggling your fingers on a clarinet or saxophone or flute. All you got to do is just play those white notes, try to find melodies, but try not to hang on the D, F, and A so much, but really enjoy the sound of the B as a sound in itself. Enjoy the G as a sound in itself. Enjoy the E as a sound in itself, not just as a stepping tone to get to the next chord tone. So, as I was starting to say that, I thought I had this other brilliant observation to make that now is gone. So, but it was... Let me see if I can bring it back. It wasn't brilliant. It was just another little thing that I wanted to say along the way. Feel free to be asking me questions about this in chat. But also what I was doing was just exploring, right? Hey, that's a neat idea. And I'm just playing with that little motif and moving it around. And now I remember my brilliant observation. Because all month long, we've been talking about the Beatles, right? Because in my musicianship skills workshop that many of you are participating in, I've been using Beatles songs as examples of things. And one thing I haven't done that I really have wanted to, but some other time, I want to focus on George Harrison's contributions, specifically on the Indian influence in the Beatles' music that came by way of George Harrison. I mean, all the Beatles hung out with Indian musicians at different points, but for most of them, it was sort of a passing little thing. George is the one who really said, "Oh, these Indians really have something going." He learned to play the sitar, and he really got into Indian music and started to write songs that used concepts of Indian music. And uh, I'm going to try to play one from memory because I don't want to mess up. I'm not going to play the recording in here and have YouTube flag it as copyright violation. But oh, by the way, the reason I picked Dorian instead of major is it's really easy to just hang on any note over that D and have it sound good. If we try to do this on a major chord, this F sounds kind of bad over the C chord, and so you have one of your 7 notes that you really don't want to sit on so much. So that note there, the 4th of a major chord, is called an avoid tone, and so it makes it a little harder to just enjoy a long period of time on a major chord because there's going to be one note you kind of got to avoid. And this is why in jazz we use Lydian so much, because that gives us a note that's cool sounding over that C chord, right? But also there's something just a little darker about Dorian. So anyhow, there's a George Harrison song. Now I can't even remember which one it's called. But we went talking. Something like that. Y'all know what that song is? I can't remember what it's called. I think it's from Revolver. This is a song that's using what we would call the Mixolydian mode. It's all based on this C. And when I talk about this connection to Indian music, there's an instrument called the Tampura or tamboro. It's just a drone instrument, and all it does is this. It's got 4 strings. They make different versions of the things, and basically 2 of them are G and 2 of them are C, if I'm remembering the tuning correctly. It's just this droning over and over again. And I forget the actual arrangement of the strings, but it's essentially this. It's a root, a fifth, and a root. And this will drone for an entire song, an entire piece. And when I say an entire song, a lot of performances in Indian music are maybe 20 minutes on one piece. And it's largely improvised. And it will have that Tampura droning on a single pitch the whole way through. Someone was asking yesterday in the MuseScore Cafe about tuning of toms. Yeah, you tune toms, but you tune it once for the gig because based on what you think sounds good. For an Indian performance, they tune the tablas, which are the pitched, which are the equivalent of a tom, and tablas can produce a broad range of pitch, and that came up in discussion in the community here. Now that's, Norwegian Wood also uses Mixolydian, but that song wasn't. That's. So yeah, different song, same mode. But yeah, it's a different one from there. It's either Love You To or Within Without You, I think it's called. Within Without You, I think it's called. The tablas are capable of producing a broad range of pitches, but there's going to be a fundamental pitch that sort of creates the overtones that the others work from, and so they do tune that to the Tampura. So at the beginning of a performance, the Tampura gets his pitches going, the sitar's tuned to that, and they're tuned to each other actually, and then the tabla player will tune to that, so that the main 2 pitches that come off the tablas fit with the Tampura part, but the tabla is going to produce all these other overtones and everything. But it'll be the sitar, it'll be the violins, it'll be the other instruments or other, in more traditional stringed instruments that are used. I don't remember the names of them. That will be doing the more melodic stuff. And vocalists, there's a whole technique of vocal singing that I just did a really bad imitation of. So anyhow, that melody there, I'm going to play that melody again to the best of my ability to remember it. We were talking about the space between ourselves. I think those are the lyrics, something like that. This thing, so it goes up to the B flat, right? And that's an important note in that scale. And then it does this thing of da do da dum. It does this thing involving fourths. That's like an interesting little melodic thing. It's a little melodic hook or whatever, and then he repeats it. And then it's like he's repeating just that little bit of motif a few times, kind of like the tag thing that we were talking about with Jim. And then he doesn't actually come to the high C until later on in the melody. The melody is all based on just these pitches. Just these six pitches. He doesn't introduce either the low C or the high C until towards the end of that verse. And then eventually it goes up to the D and eventually gets other notes also. This idea of taking a scale that's already limited, it's only got 7 notes and we're not going to change chords the whole piece, it's already limited, and yet in Indian music, this thing of saying we're going to limit ourselves that much further by saying, I'm not going to use that C. I'm not going to use that C. I'm not going to use that C until I'm ready to give you that C. And then they bring in the C later. And people are like, finally I got to hear the C. And it could be any note that you hold back. And this idea that you start off an improvisation with and it could be an improvised melody or a composed one like that one. Indian music is like equal parts composed and improvised, roughly. There'll be the main melody of the piece that they keep coming back to, and then all sorts of improvised flights of fancy they go into. And both in the composed melody and in the improvisations, people will do the same thing of focusing on just a smaller pitch set within the already small pitch set that they're dealing with. And these wouldn't be necessarily just the 7 Renaissance modes. They would be, 6 Renaissance modes plus Locrian, which was sort of the honorary addition later. But all sorts of different scales with additional halftones in there or quarter tones and other things. So, but taking an already limited scale, or rag, that it might be called in Indian music, and saying we're only going to focus on these few notes within that scale and play with those for a while, and then gradually introduce this one other note. That's sort of like the equivalent of saying, hey, I'm finally changing to another chord. Except they're not changing to another chord. They're just introducing one more note to the collection of pitches still over that same drone. So in any case, that's something that was occurring to me, is like I really wanted to get more deeper into that aspect of the Beatles music, and I still will sometime, but also maybe we'll go deeper into Indian music in general, because it's something that's many of us really have very little experience with Indian music. I'm fortunate in that my ex studied in India for a couple months, and an intensive. When I say a couple months, it sounds like nothing, but it was like this intensive music study experience. And then one of her teachers came over here, and I had the experience of playing with him. And then there's this really great Indian American musician that I did a whole lot of work with. Collaboration with on different things, and really got to understand a lot about what he took from Indian music into his own thing. So Dan's asking about the 8-bar phrase, and so I will circle around to that and then wrap things up here. So anyhow, Indian music is a whole interesting thing, and now that we had someone asking about tabla, also just sort of coincidentally, while I was already talking about the Beatles and thinking I wanted to be talking about this in context of George Harrison, it's going to happen, just, not sure when. So this idea of 8-bar phrases is really, it's one of these things that we feel, but it's not that we feel 8-bar phrases specifically. We feel 4/4, right? So much of musical culture is based on 4/4. Yes, there's 3/4 also. Yes, there's other time signatures. But all cultures that I know of have the equivalent of 4/4 built into them, and that's 4 beats. And those 4 beats usually is like 2 beats and 2 beats. We feel them as a yin yang within the measure, and then we feel 2 measure phrases, and this is huge. Like in the dance world, they count to 8 all the time, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they will plan their dance. And when I talk about the dance world, I mean like ballet. I mean, that jazz and modern dance. I mean like, classical dance as opposed to, people in a ballroom dance floor or something. But, dance performance is very often based on these 8-beat units. And it's almost like how we divide music up into measures. Dancers often divide music up into 8-beat units. So those are 2-bar phrases. And Afro-Cuban music is all based on 2-beat cells. Pum, pum, 1, 2, 2. That's a 2-beat cell called a clave, and that is like the underpinning of a lot of Afro-Cuban music. A lot of other rock styles are based on 2-measure long drum patterns, like She Loves You. I mentioned She Loves You, yeah, She Loves You, yeah, 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 boom, bum, loves you, and that's the 2-bar drum pattern that repeats over and over again. So we start with a 1-measure pattern, and then we feel rhythmically in 2-beat patterns, but then lyrically we typically that 5, 6, 7, 8 is how you count in. That's like the equivalent of a pickup. To count in a piece, you count 5, 6, 7, 8 because you don't bother counting all 8 beats. You just count those last 4. The lyrics typically will lay out in 4-measure phrase. A line of lyric is typically a 4-measure phrase. This is an overgeneralization, but it's very typical. Very typical. And yeah, if humans had 3 legs, we maybe would be feeling 3 more. I don't know. And 3 is definitely a thing. But, it's this other thing. And there's some cultures that really emphasize the 3, and more of their music is based on 3 than other cultures. I think, going back to the Baroque era, 3 was a commoner time signature than it is today. But, I think by the time we got to military marches and by the time we got to jazz and things, this 4 business really started to take hold. And now it's a big thing to take a song that's originally in 3 and just, hey, we're going to do it in 4 so we can make it work for us in jazz, or we can make it work in rock or something. So you'll take all these songs, all these older songs that were originally in 3 and say, hey, we're going to do this thing in 4. That's a common thing. But anyhow, so 4-measure phrases tends to fit the length of a lyric line, and it's going to be 4 and not 3 or 5, so that we can still feel these 2-measure units rhythmically within it. And then we're going to have couplets of those 4-measure phrases, because so much of lyric writing is about couplets, call and response kind of thing. So a 4-measure phrase and then an answering 4-measure phrase. Blues is based on a triplet. That's not what you call it, but 3 4-measure phrases that all kind of combine. And then so you get that 12-bar unit instead of an 8-bar unit. But these 8-bar units are super big. And then you go from there to the 16-bar unit, and now you're talking about what like most of the Baroque dance forms are based on 16-bar units. 32-bar units, 8 bars, 8 bars, 8 bars, and 8 bars. 4 8-bar phrases. They're all powers of 2, is what I'm saying. Once you have a measure, you double that, you have 2 measures. Double that, you have 4 measures, and that's a line of lyrics. Double that, you have 8, and that's usually a whole completed melodic phrase. Do 16, and now it's either that same phrase twice, with a first ending and second ending, what's called a period structure, more or less, and then maybe a contrasting B section, but then that would leave us with only 3 phrases, and so we bring the A section back, so we can have 2 A's, a B, and an A, and that's the common American pop format that most of those Beatles songs also use. So anyhow, that's a little bit about the 4-measure, 8-measure phrases. So this tends to come to us naturally. writing in 4-measure phrases. We don't usually go too far out of our way to make it happen, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we let there be a phrase that's something other than that, or if we start to try to do that, we have to look at it and say, is this going to be okay? Is it going to be okay to have a 9-bar phrase here? Because maybe the words just needed an extra bar or an extra beat in a measure. You can do that, but it definitely causes a slight disruption in the continuum there, and then you have to, decide, is that the little bit of surprise that I want? Is that the thing that's going to be my hook here? So anyhow, I want to thank everyone for all the questions and comments and discussion here. Thank Jim again for the music. And this has been a nice little exploration of a variety of topics that I don't know, somehow maybe all connect to a concept of simplicity but what simplicity opens up for you. And that's my rough tie together of this. So keep writing music, keep posting stuff. I'll get some more stuff next time. Next week we'll start a new topic in the musicianship skills workshop. I've got a few different ideas in mind. Feel free to pass me your own ideas for this sort of thing. And we'll do more next time. So I want to thank everyone again, and see you later.